Thank you for viewing my presentation, and hello. My name is Brigitte Mussack, and I'm going to be talking today about a departmental open source textbook created for a technical communication course that centers social justice. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the context that led to the creation of this textbook, the journey of creating it and launching it, and some of the major challenges, and kind of looking ahead to where we hope this text goes and what we hope it can do for our technical writing students and instructors and our departmental community. So this is called Toward a Culturally Responsive, Ethically Responsible Technical Communication Textbook, Centering Social Justice and Reflecting on Collaborative Labor. As I said, my name is Brigitte Mussack. I'm with the University of Minnesota. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Writing Studies. I'm also the advanced writing coordinator, and part of my role is helping to develop curriculum, working with the director of undergraduate studies, and I supervise one of our courses, which is an Introduction to Technical and Professional Communication course, which I will talk about in just a moment. So the guiding questions going into this project and this presentation, and one that I hope if you are here watching this, you will engage and reflect on with me. How can we take an approach to teaching technical and professional communication that reflects a department-wide ongoing effort to frame technical communication as always inherently centered and concerned with linguistic justice? I will talk a little bit about how we approach that question, we as a department, myself as an instructor and as a course coordinator, by creating and implementing this open text. Another question, how can an undergraduate program in technical writing and communication prepare students for the workplace while emphasizing in an integral way to their curriculum and practices diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice? This is an important question. Our program is very centered on students entering the workforce with a degree in technical writing and communication. We have a technical communication advisory board made up of industry professionals, and we really leaned into their expertise when creating this textbook and thinking about centering diversity, equity, and inclusion in our courses. The other thing that I want to focus on in this question, or bring to the highlight a little bit, is that we wanted to think about how we could make diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice a central, integral part of the course. We did not want it to just be a unit in a technical writing course or a single assignment in a technical writing course, but rather thinking about how we could help students think about how technical communication is always interested in, invested in, caught up in matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then finally, how can we position technical and professional writing students not only to step into the workforce, but to change it for the better, to work continually towards social justice and equity? These are the guiding questions that I continue to think about as I develop this open text. None of them, I think, are answered or even answerable, but I see this as a continual work in progress. So just to give you a little bit of context about the open source textbook, this actually began as a project back in 2019 during the spring semester. I applied for and received an accessibility grant through the University of Minnesota Libraries. And this grant provided library support to create an open source textbook that would be hosted through the libraries, and students could access it there. This is a textbook that we wanted to use for a multi-section technical writing course. The course is a 3,000 level, upper level writing course. It fulfills a number of university-wide requirements for writing. The course enrolls 24 students in each section across roughly 20 sections each semester. That number is sometimes higher. And we also offer a handful of sections over the summer. Annually, this course reaches over 1,000 students. And these students come to us from a diverse majors and across different colleges within the university. Students who are majoring in things like economics, design, biology, engineering, English, communications. Um, the Writing Studies department does also have its own undergraduate major. This major is Technical Writing and Communication. This is a required course for our students, our major students, but this course also as a required elective for many different programs and programs within different colleges across the university. The Department of Writing Studies is located within the College of Liberal Arts. But again, students enrolled in different colleges within the university will take this class. So this is important to think about in the context of this project, because this is a course that really has a wide reach across the university. And it seemed like a good place for our department to focus some efforts on thinking about how we center diversity, equity, and inclusion in our writing courses. So the open source textbook began as a way to create free content that would be created collaboratively and that would represent a departmental approach to teaching technical communication. It was also imagined to be a living document, by which I mean one that could be more easily adapted, revised, and remixed each year, more so than any sort of printed or traditional textbook. And as a living document, the hope was that it would invite the voices of other instructors and students in order to reflect the entire community served through this course. So this project was really conceived of as a collaborative project. I really wanted this open text to be something that could involve other instructors, even student voices, and again, really sort of represent the departmental approach to teaching technical communication. This textbook was also a response to increasing concerns and frustrations with instructors and with students regarding the textbook that we had been using in this class. This is a class that is offered roughly half of the sections are fully online asynchronous, and half of the sections are what we call hybrid or blended format. So they are primarily face-to-face courses with some element of online instruction as well. Each section taught by different instructors shares similar curriculum, and each section has a shared textbook. So there's one textbook that was already being used across all these technical writing courses, all sections of this course. And this open source text was, again, sort of a way to address a handful of different issues that our department and our instructors had been experiencing, including the cost of the textbook, and then also just students' ability to access it in an online space, and the content of the textbook not always being completely aligned with the approaches that instructors were using with the course. So the open source textbook was meant to be free for the students, easily accessible in an online space, designed to be accessed in an online space, and then also content that was really tailored for this course. So the textbook, open source text, was already a project that began in 2019. In spring of 2020, roughly a year after receiving this grant funding, the global COVID-19 pandemic forced the University of Minnesota and our department into an online spaces like universities across the country. Over the next year, the university community and the Writing Studies department community in particular voiced an ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it made sense at the time to shift the focus of this open source textbook to really be about the intersection of social justice and technical communication. It seemed like the right time to do this for our department, and it seemed like sort of a natural opportunity as we're developing this open source text that would be used in every section of this technical writing course, to really think about our departmental commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and thinking about how we can center social justice in this class that reaches so many students across the university. So I'm calling this a little bit of a kairotic moment. The textbook and the current social and political climate in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, in the United States, and across the world really called to action in a way to provide students with a framework of technical and professional communication, which can often be viewed as objective or apolitical, as inherently concerned with social justice as a core principle of our field, and is necessarily engaged in problem solving and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The quotes in this block of text are from Walton Moore and Jones's 2019 publication. And that text calls for coalition building as a way to approach social justice in technical communication. This open source text was one small departmental attempt to think about coalition building as we worked to create a collaborative text that would be the foundation for this course. Our department takes a very rhetorical approach to teaching technical communication. Instructors had already been doing really interesting things that centered social justice in their courses, that really got students to think about the intersection between social justice and technical communication. However, students often would take this class to fulfill a requirement for many different reasons, and it's important, I think, for me to note that this idea that technical communication can often be viewed as objective or apolitical, this is often how students would enter the class thinking about technical and professional communication. They want to obtain a set of skills, really kind of understand how to write these different genres. Students weren't necessarily entering the course already thinking about technical and professional communication as a type of communication that was inherently concerned with social justice. So we really wanted to emphasize to students that the field of technical communication really is engaged in social justice work, and it's a core principle of the field, as Walton, Moore, and Jones describe in their text. So in fall 2021, after quite a bit of work, the textbook, the open source text, went live in all sections of the course, and I'm going to leave my slides for a moment and take you to that text. So here it is. This is what it looks like for students. It's through Pressbooks is the software that the University of Minnesota Libraries uses to create and house this content. It's called Introduction to Technical and Professional Communication, Technical Communication Through a Social Justice Lens. So one of the ways to kind of center social justice in the course and in this text is to begin the semester with students reading this introduction section that really talks a lot about social justice being integral to technical communication, and that that technical communication is rhetorical. So the beginning of the textbook lays the groundwork for thinking about technical communication as inherently concerned with social justice and linguistic justice. Technical communication as being inherently rhetorical, audience focused, and concerned with matters of access and inclusion. These are the four major sections in the textbook. So first, students are introduced to taking a rhetorical approach. Then section 2 talks about technical communication, social justice, and collective access. Section 3, defining the field of technical communication, and then section 4, common genres. And section 4 contains the genres that students are asked to complete throughout the semester in this course. Each of the sections is divided further into clusters of information. The textbook is quite self-referential with links to other sections of the text. each section builds on the previous section. But again, it's meant to be organized in a way that sets up this intersection between technical and professional communication and social justice, and thinking about technical communication as inherently rhetorical, as engaged in questions of power and access. It's meant to set that up at the beginning, to lay that as sort of the foundation, and then students build off of that foundation as they learn about different approaches and different genres and things like collaboration. So I'm going to hopefully go back to my slides. So from the introduction sets up sort of these two key points for students to take away. First, that language is a powerful tool that is always inherently involved in shaping and framing the way that people interact with the world. And two, that technical communication is rhetorical. So one of the things that I really wanted to emphasize with this open text is that the Department of Writing Studies at the University of Minnesota, that instructors teaching this Introduction to Technical and Professional Communication course take a very rhetorical approach to technical communication. And that instructors teaching the course, and that all sections of this course really emphasize the importance of thinking about language as rhetorical and thinking about technical communication, which again involves genres that can often be framed as more objective, apolitical, thinking about technical communication as inherently rhetorical, and really having that central for students in this open text was important. So the four main sections of the text, as I already pointed out, taking a rhetorical approach, technical communication, social justice, and collective access, defining the field of technical communication, common genres in technical communication. And then each of these four sections refers back to the core concepts brought up in the introduction. And each section interrogates an intersection with social justice. So as students are thinking about how the field of technical communication is defined, that section talks about defining the field in terms of the field's connection to social justice and collective access. As students learn different genres, for example, technical description or proposal or a formal report, these genres are again framed as intersecting with social justice, being engaged in matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion in meaningful ways. So I'll just read a little quote from the introduction that is, I think, an important insight into the framing that the open text provides. While technical communication is sometimes framed as a straightforward, objective way to use language, this text positions technical communicators as engaged in social justice every time they use language. So one thing with the course and with the open text that I really wanted to emphasize to students again is this idea that every time technical communicators engage language, they're engaging social justice, because language is inherently political, language is inherently engaged with issues of power and access, and that technical communication and technical communicators in particular need to be concerned with their audience and with access, and thinking about how access to information is often relevant to considering power and power structures and communities of power. So one of the ways that this text, open source text, centers DEI is in the content. So the content of the text takes a rhetorical approach, as I've said already, and emphasizes technical communication is inherently engaged in matters of social justice. It emphasizes technical communication as rhetorical, as audience-centered, and is always concerned with access. The textbook defines the connection between social justice and technical communication first, and as it covers various topics and genres related to the work students do in the course, it returns to how each topic intersects with social justice work. So again, the goal, thinking through the open text and how it would help to kind of center the work students do in the course. So important to think about how we could make social justice an integral part of the technical communication course, as opposed to sort of tacking it on as just a standalone unit or a chapter. So another way that this open text is engaged with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I'm calling DEI here, is in the creation of the text. So the text was created with student and instructor access in mind, specifically related to the rise in textbook costs and the difficulties in accessing more traditional textbooks online. The open text was also created considering diversity, equity, and inclusion in that it invited feedback from all members of the department from its inception and continues to invite feedback and contributions. So I am listed as the author of this open source textbook. However, there are other contributors. If you read through the text, which I hope that you will, there are other sections that are attributed to other members of our department. And I emphasize in the introduction too that the textbook really is something that I put together, but it represents, or hopefully represents, a departmental approach to teaching technical communication. From the beginning of the project back in the spring of 2019, through sort of email calls and meetings, and soliciting participation from instructors who teach the course, I've tried to make this as much of a collaborative project as possible. And I will in just a moment get into some of the difficulties or challenges that I've run into with that. So a third way that the open text works to center diversity, equity, and inclusion is through building community. So related to thinking of this text as a collaborative approach to teaching technical communication, one of the goals of this open text involves centering the community of the department and the wider communities of the university and of the network of technical communication teachers and students. The textbook is specifically designed for students enrolled in an Introduction to Technical Communication course, but can be accessed and used by anyone. The open text centers community in the content, which is tailored specifically to engage this community of learners. So the students who are enrolled in this course, and creation, which is intentionally collaborative and ongoing. So again, one of my goals for this open source text is that it really is reflective of and engages a community of scholars and teachers and learners. Unlike more traditional textbooks, the open source text, it's very easy to edit and to add things and to change things. And I am hoping to develop or continue to develop a process that invites critique or feedback, or ways for instructors and students to be active contributors and to lend their voices and their work to this open text as a way to really reflect the current community of folks engaged with this, this particular technical communication course. Okay, so that brings me to the challenges of creating collaborative content, which many of you know if you have done this sort of work. An ongoing challenge of the textbook involves the labor needed to create collaborative content and lack of ability to compensate faculty and graduate instructors and students for that labor. So I mentioned that this is a grant-funded project. The grant was amazing because the University of Minnesota librarians who worked with us to actually develop the content into something that looks like a textbook, using Pressbooks, using this open source software, has been just phenomenal. And it's been wonderful to have a home for this open source text through the University of Minnesota libraries. However, there's very little money attached to the grant. So one of the challenges with creating collaborative content, which is meant or my intention was to engage a community, is that creating a textbook takes a lot of work. There's a lot of labor involved, and I really had no way to compensate people for this labor. So I ran into challenges not getting folks interested or excited about the project, but when it came to really putting in the hours that you need to put into creating the content, that's where it became difficult to find folks who could really give that kind of labor, not for lack of wanting to, but just really practically speaking. At the same time, without collaboration, the textbook may not serve its purpose as a living document that provides space for community voices. So I'm running into right now this sort of difficulty, double-edged sword of wanting to engage a community and to invite collaboration, and on the other hand, recognizing that there's a lot of labor involved in that collaboration. It's not the kind of thing where you can kind of show up to a couple of meetings. It involves a lot of writing, and writing is labor intensive, and this is just it's challenging. So while the open text was imagined as a departmental collaboration, soliciting contributions proved more challenging. There was and continues to be wide interest in developing the text, yet very few instructors collaborated specific content. The challenges with collaboration, not for lack of interest, but rather likely due to lack of available compensation for labor. And again, creating an open textbook for a multi-section technical communication course is incredibly labor intensive. And I really want to emphasize and continue to invite reflection on the fact too that a lot of this labor falls on graduate instructors and contingent non-tenure track faculty. So most of the instructors for this course are graduate students and non-tenure track faculty. And I really try to be careful when I think about the ways that I ask folks to give of their time. So again, there's a lot of interest in developing this textbook, a lot of excitement about it, a lot of folks wanting to collaborate, but then when it's just something I think to continue to sit with, thinking about how can we compensate folks for what really is a labor-intensive activity. And again, getting back to this idea of collaboration and labor, open source textbooks are an excellent way to invite collaboration and to create accessible content for students. At the same time, the collaboration necessary to build coalitions and to reflect diverse perspectives takes labor, and that labor often falls on graduate students and contingent teaching faculty, as I mentioned. So the same voices that we want to be sure to include in such texts belong to individuals who already labor without compensation. Graduate instructors especially come to mind. And this is an ongoing issue that I think departments just have to attend to. And again, when we're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in social justice work, I think we need to think about the folks who are creating this valuable content for us. And student labor too. I really would love for more student voices to be part of this text in the form of examples and exercises especially. But again, I want to think carefully about how we tend to, how we value student labor when we're creating these kinds of things. Despite the challenges related to collaboration and labor, this text has been well received by instructors so far in the department. It's running its second semester right now, and continues to invite collaboration and contribution. I plan to survey instructors this summer to better understand how they use the text, and again, call for contribution. So I don't want to give up on thinking about how this text could become increasingly collaborative and increasingly reflective of diverse voices within the department. And I'm hoping I can find some ways to do that going forward. I hope that I can incentivize participation now that there is a first iteration of the text, and also reduce instructor labor by asking them to leverage work they already do when teaching the course. So thinking about how I can make more specific asks of instructors, like contributing existing content, offering them bylines, offering bylines within the open text, so that they can be contributing authors to that. And I do hope that now that there is a text, an open text, it's not just an idea anymore, it's a thing that folks can read and click through and engage with, that it might be easier for instructors and students to collaborate to something that exists. In other words, the kind of labor that it takes to offer critiques or to build on existing content looks and is different than the kind of labor it takes to create the content. So finally, thank you for sitting through my presentation and listening. If you're interested in sharing experiences or asking questions related to creating an open text for use in a multi-section writing course, please reach out. I'd love to share experiences. I hope that this presentation can be generative of reflective work and thinking about different ways to navigate these challenges. I'd love to hear how other folks have navigated them at your own institutions, how you've handled the labor involved, especially in creating these collaborative texts, what your thoughts are on collaboration and open source textbooks as a way to think about texts that are maybe less stagnant, more reflective of community values and approaches than traditional textbooks. Also, finally, feel free to use anything or everything from this open text, remix it, make it your own. It is available. My name again is Brigitte Mussack. You can reach me, muss0039@umn.edu. And then at the bottom of this slide is the link for that open source text. It's pressbooks.umn.edu/techwriting, TECHWRITING. And I invite you to look at it and read through it. And again, thank you. I hope that this has been useful to hear about my experience. Despite the challenges, it's been widely positive, creating this open source text. And I do think it's helped us to really create a foundation, a framework for an approach to a technical and professional writing course that centers social justice and that really frames diversity, equity, and inclusion as an integral part of that class. So thank you very much.